Nalongo, aching, stood outside a small apartment building in Kampala with a single key in her hand and tears filling her eyes. At 29 years old, she had finally done something she once thought was impossible. After years of working long hours as a freelance graphic designer, saving every extra shilling, and saying no to things she wanted, she had bought her very own one-bedroom apartment. It was not in a fancy neighborhood. The rooms were small. The kitchen could barely fit 2 people, and the living room was just big enough for a sofa, a tiny table, and a bookshelf. But to Nalongo, it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen because every wall, every window, and every corner represented years of sacrifice. Nobody had given it to her. She had earned it herself. A few days later, she invited her family over for a simple housewarming. She cooked homemade food, bought a small cake, and decorated the living room with fresh flowers. She was excited to show everyone what she had worked so hard to achieve. When her older sister, Zuri Namusok, walked inside, she looked around for only a few seconds before laughing. "Wait, this is it," she said loudly. Several people turned to look at her. Zuri shook her head and smiled. "Nalongo, this isn't an apartment. It's a glorified storage room. My wardrobe is probably bigger than your bedroom." A few relatives laughed. Someone added, "At least she won't spend much time cleaning." More laughter filled the room. Nalongo smiled politely, but inside, every word hurt. She had imagined this day for years. Instead of celebrating her achievement, she felt embarrassed in her own home. She quietly served food and thanked everyone for coming, pretending the jokes did not bother her. But deep inside, she made herself a promise. One day, this tiny apartment would become the beginning of something much bigger. She would not waste her energy arguing or trying to prove anyone wrong with. She would let her actions speak for her. As the guests left that evening, Nalongo closed the door, leaned against it, and looked around her little home. It was still small. It was still simple. But for the first time since everyone had gone, she smiled. "They can laugh today," she whispered to herself. "One day, they'll understand why this place means everything." That night, while the city lights of Kampala shone through her window, Nalongo opened her laptop, sat at her tiny dining table, and went back to work. She had no idea that the little apartment everyone mocked would one day become the place where her biggest dreams would come true. Nalongo and Zuri had grown up in the same house, eaten at the same table, and gone through many of the same struggles. But even as little girls, everyone could see they were completely different. Zuri was outgoing, confident, and loved being the center of attention. Whenever relatives visited, they praised her beauty, her stylish clothes, and the way she could make everyone laugh. She quickly became the family's favorite. If she wanted something, someone usually found a way to give it to her. Nalongo was the opposite. She was quiet, patient, and always willing to help. If something broke in the house, she found a way to fix it. If a younger cousin needed help with homework, she was the first to sit down and explain it. When their parents were busy, Nalongo took care of many responsibilities without complaining. She didn't expect applause. She simply believed that hard work would speak for itself one day. As they grew older, the difference between them became even bigger. Zuri loved expensive clothes, the newest phones, fancy restaurants, and taking perfect pictures for social media. Her online pages were full of smiling selfies, weekend trips, birthday parties, and shopping bags from expensive stores. People who followed her thought she was living the perfect life. Nalongo didn't care about looking rich. She wore simple clothes, used her phone until it stopped working, and rarely posted anything online. Whenever she earned money from a graphic design project, she asked herself one question: will this make my future better? Instead of buying luxury items, she paid for online courses, better design software, and a stronger laptop. She believed every new skill was an investment that nobody could take away from her. Sometimes family members laughed at her choices. They told her she worked too much and enjoyed life too little. They couldn't understand why she saved almost every extra shilling instead of spending it. Meanwhile, Zuri often teased her, saying, "You can't take your money with you. At least enjoy it while you're young." Nalongo would just smile and stay quiet. She wasn't trying to compete with her sister. She was building a different kind of life, one that didn't need likes, compliments, or expensive things to feel successful. Without realizing it, the two sisters were walking down completely different paths. One was chasing the appearance of success. The other was quietly building the real thing. Neither of them knew it yet, but the choices they made every single day were creating two very different. After the housewarming, Nalongo couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Every time she remembered Zuri laughing and calling her apartment a glorified storage room, the words stung. For a few days, she felt hurt and disappointed. She kept replaying the moment in her mind. But instead of arguing with her sister or trying to prove her wrong, she made a different decision. She turned her pain into motivation. Every morning, she woke up before sunrise, made herself a cup of tea, opened her laptop, and got to work. She accepted projects that other designers thought were too difficult. Some nights, she worked until after midnight, only stopping when her eyes became too tired to stay open. It wasn't easy, but every completed project made her a little better. Nalongo also knew that working hard was not enough. She wanted to keep learning. Whenever she had free time, she watched online lessons, studied new design trends, practiced different software, and improved her communications. She wanted clients from around the world to trust her with bigger and better projects. Slowly, her hard work started paying off. Happy clients recommended her to their friends and business partners. Soon, she was working with people from different countries. Her email inbox became busier every week, and her calendar filled with new opportunities. She didn't celebrate too early. She simply kept going. Her tiny apartment became much more than a place to sleep. The small dining table became her office. The living room became her meeting space for online video calls. One corner held books and notebooks where she studied every evening. The apartment that others laughed at became the place where her dreams were quietly taking shape. Whenever she felt tired, she looked around the little apartment and remembered that painful day. Instead of feeling angry, she smiled. The jokes that once hurt her were now pushing her forward. Every new client, every payment, and every skill she learned brought her one step closer to the future she wanted. Month after month, her income began to grow. She earned more than she ever had before, but she didn't rush to buy expensive. She saved, invested, and continued improving her business. While other people judged her by the size of her apartment, Nalongo was building something far more valuable inside its small. No one could see it yet, but her quiet determination was slowly changing her life forever. While Nalongo quietly focused on growing her business, Zuri's life looked more exciting than ever. Every time someone opened her social media page, they saw beautiful pictures. One week she was showing off a new designer handbag. The next week she was posting photos from a fancy restaurant with expensive food on the table. Soon after, there were pictures from luxury hotels, weekend trips, and parties with smiling friends. Her captions always talked about living your best life and hard work paying off. Friends and relatives were impressed. Many people wished they had Zuri's life. Some even compared the two sisters and said, "Look at Zuri. She really knows how to enjoy life." Others wondered why Nalongo worked so hard when Zuri seemed to have everything without sacrificing so much. But social media only showed a small part of the story. Behind every perfect photo was a problem that nobody could see. Many of the expensive clothes and handbags had been bought with credit cards. The vacations were often paid for with borrowed money. Every month, new bills arrived, and the loans kept getting bigger. Instead of feeling free, Zuri was becoming trapped by the lifestyle she was trying so hard to maintain. Things were even more difficult than people imagined. Zuri's boyfriend handled most of their money. He always told her not to worry, because he would take care of everything. At first, she believed him. She trusted him completely. But little by little, she realized she had almost no control over her own finances. She didn't know exactly how much debt they had or where all the money was going. Even when she felt stressed or scared, Zuri never showed it online. She would put on her best outfit, smile for the camera, add a cheerful caption, and pretend everything was perfect. The more pressure she felt, the more she posted, hoping nobody would notice it. Meanwhile, Nalongo rarely shared anything about her own life. She was too busy working with clients, learning new skills, and building her future. To people scrolling through social media, it looked like Zuri was winning and Nalongo was falling behind. But appearances can be very misleading. One sister was busy creating a life that looked successful. The other was quietly building a life that truly was. Soon, the difference between those two paths would become impossible to hide. Several months passed, and Nalongo's life continued to change in ways that nobody around her noticed. She kept working from the same small apartment, using the same simple desk and laptop. She didn't post about her success online or tell her relatives how well her business was doing. She believed that real success didn't need to be announced. It would speak for itself at the right time. One morning, she received an email that made her heart race. An international company had been following her work and wanted to hire her for a major design project. It was the biggest contract of her career. Nalongo read the email 3 times because she could hardly believe it. Then she smiled, whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, and got to work. She knew this opportunity could change her life, so she gave it everything she had. The project was challenging, but Nalongo delivered her best. When the payment arrived, it was more money than she had ever earned from a single client. Instead of rushing out to celebrate or buying expensive things, she sat down with a notebook and made a careful plan. First, she cleared the few debts she still had. Then she added more money to her savings and investments. After speaking with a trusted property agent, she bought a small rental apartment. It wasn't a flashy purchase, but it would bring her steady income every month. To Nalongo, that was more exciting than owning a luxury car. The little apartment that everyone had laughed at was no longer just her home. It had become the headquarters of a growing business. Clients from different countries trusted her work. Payments arrived regularly. New opportunities kept coming, and before long, she even hired a few freelancers to help with larger projects. Everything she had dreamed about was slowly becoming real. While Nalongo's future was getting brighter, Zuri's world was beginning to fall apart. The bills she had ignored for months could no longer be avoided. Loan payments kept increasing, and the credit card companies wanted their money. Then came another painful surprise. After months of arguments about money, her boyfriend ended their relationship and walked away. As he left, Zuri discovered that many of the financial problems were even worse than she had imagined. For the first time in years, she felt completely alone. The expensive clothes, beautiful photos, and fancy dinners could not hide the truth anymore. The life that had looked so perfect was slowly falling apart, while the quiet sister everyone had underestimated was building a future stronger than anyone had imagined. One rainy evening, Nalongo was finishing work on a client project when she heard a knock at her apartment door. The rain was falling heavily outside, and she wasn't expecting anyone. She looked at the clock. It was already late. She walked to the door and slowly opened it. Standing outside was Zuri. For a moment, Nalongo could hardly recognize her. The confident smile that was always on her face was gone. Her makeup had been washed away by the rain, her clothes were wet, and her eyes were red from crying. Beside her were 2 large suitcases, the only thing she seemed to have left. Neither of them spoke for a few seconds. Finally, Zuri looked down at the floor and quietly said, "Can I come in?" Nalongo stepped aside without saying a word. As soon as Zuri entered, she looked around the same small apartment she had once laughed at. Everything was still neat and simple, but it felt warm and peaceful. The apartment no longer looked like a place to mock. It felt like a real home. They sat across from each other at the little dining table. Nalongo made 2 cups of hot tea and waited patiently. She didn't ask questions right away. She could see that her sister was struggling to find the right word. After a long silence, Zuri took a deep breath. "I lost my apartment," she said quietly. "After everything that happened, I couldn't keep up with the rent anymore." Tears rolled down her face. "I don't have anywhere else to go. I know I don't deserve to ask this after the way I treated you, but can I stay here? Just for a few weeks. I'll leave as soon as I can." Nalongo looked at her sister without saying anything. In her mind, painful memories came rushing back. She remembered the housewarming party, the laughter, the jokes about her tiny apartment, and the embarrassment she had felt in front of the whole family. For a brief moment, she wondered if this was a chance to remind Zuri of those cruel words. But the thought quickly disappeared. She looked at the woman sitting in front of her. This wasn't the proud sister who had mocked her. This was someone who had lost almost everything and was asking for help. Nalongo smiled gently and said, "You don't have to stand out in the rain. Stay here for as long as you need. We'll figure things out one step at a time." Relief filled Zuri's face. She quietly whispered, "Thank you." That night, Nalongo helped her carry the suitcases into the apartment. She never mentioned her growing business, her investments, or the rental property she now owned. She didn't want to make Zuri feel smaller than she already did. Instead, she simply gave her a clean towel, prepared the sofa for her to sleep on, and welcomed her into the same little apartment that had once been called a glorified storage room. Neither sister knew that the days ahead would change their relationship forever. The first few days felt awkward for both sisters. Zuri tried to stay out of Nalongo's way, and Nalongo never made her feel uncomfortable. They shared simple meals, talked a little in the evenings, and slowly settled into a new routine. As the days passed, Zuri started noticing things she had never paid attention to. Every morning, Nalongo woke up early, made a cup of tea, and sat at the small dining table with her laptop. She wasn't playing games or watching videos. She was meeting clients through video calls, answering emails, reviewing designs, and planning new projects. Sometimes she spoke with people from Europe, sometimes from America, and sometimes from other African countries. They trusted her ideas, respected her opinions, and happily paid for her work. The little dining table that Zuri had once laughed at had become the center of a successful business. Almost every day, Nalongo's phone buzzed with payment notifications. She carefully recorded every payment in a notebook, checked her business accounts, and planned where every shilling should go. Some money went into saving, some went into investments, some was used to grow her business even more. There was no waste, no showing off, no expensive shopping just to impress people. One afternoon, Zuri saw Nalongo speaking with a property manager about the rental apartment she owned. Another day, she watched her interview a freelance designer she wanted to hire for a new project. Zuri was shocked. "You own a rental property?" she asked. Nalongo smiled. "Yes, it took a lot of hard work, but it's helping me build my future." For a moment, Zuri couldn't believe what she was hearing. All this time, she had thought her younger sister was struggling. The truth was completely different. Nalongo had quietly built a life that was stable, peaceful, and growing stronger every month. As Zuri looked around the apartment, she saw it with new eyes. The small bookshelf was filled with business and design books. The simple desk held years of hard work. The walls no longer looked plain. They reminded her of discipline, patience, and smart decisions. Every corner of the apartment told a story. It wasn't a symbol of failure like she had once believed. It was proof that success doesn't always begin in a big house or with expensive things. Sometimes it begins in a small room, with a laptop, a dream, and the courage to keep going when nobody believes in you. For the first time in her life, Zuri realized she had judged her sister by what she could see instead of what she was quietly building. The apartment she had mocked wasn't small because Nalongo had failed. It was small because Nalongo had chosen to build wealth before chasing. That lesson stayed with Zuri every single day she lived there. A few weeks later, the family gathered for a dinner at their parents' house. It was the first time everyone had been together in months. The table was full of food, laughter, and conversation. Nalongo and Zuri sat quietly beside each other while relatives talked about work, business, and everyday life. At first, everything seemed peaceful. Then one uncle smiled and looked at Nalongo. "So, are you still living in that tiny apartment?" he asked with a laugh. Another relative joined in. "I hope you've at least found space for all your work." Soon, a few people were laughing again, just like they had at her housewarming months before. "The apartment is so small," someone joked. "You should let us know when you finally move into a real house." Everyone laughed except Nalongo and Zuri. This time, Nalongo didn't feel embarrassed. She didn't need to force a smile. She simply took a sip of water and waited until the room became quiet. Then she spoke calmly. "Yes," she said, "I'm still living there. That little apartment has been the best investment of mine." The laughter slowly faded. Nalongo continued. "From that apartment, I built my graphic design business. I work with clients from different countries every week. The business has grown much more than I ever imagined." The room became quieter. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was simply telling the truth. "I've also been able to buy rental properties, grow my investments, and hire several freelancers who now work with me." The apartment, everyone laughed. It became the place where all of that started. Nobody said a word. The same relatives who had laughed at her months earlier looked at each other in surprise. They had judged her by the size of her home without knowing what she was building inside it. One aunt finally asked, "Why didn't you tell us any of this?" Nalongo smiled gently. "I didn't feel the need to. I'd rather spend my time building my future than explaining it." Her answer filled the room with silence. Across the table, Zuri slowly lowered her eyes. She couldn't even look at her sister. Every joke she had made about that little apartment came back to her. She remembered laughing the loudest, believing she was more successful because she had bigger rooms, expensive clothes, and a glamorous life. Now she knew the truth. Everything she had mocked had become the foundation of Nalongo's success. The tiny apartment had given her sister something that money couldn't buy overnight: peace, freedom, confidence, and a business that continued to grow every single day. For the first time, the family stopped looking at the apartment as a symbol of failure. They finally saw it for what it really was: It wasn't a small home with small dreams. It was a small beginning that had created an extraordinary future. That night, after the family dinner, Nalongo and Zuri walked home together in silence. Neither of them said much. The cool evening air filled the quiet between them. When they finally reached the apartment, Zuri sat down on the sofa and stared at the floor for a long time. After several minutes, she took a deep breath. "Nalongo," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." Nalongo sat across from her and listened. Tears slowly filled Zuri's eyes. "I've been pretending for years," she admitted. "The life everyone saw online wasn't real. I wanted people to think I was successful, even when I was struggling. I kept spending money I didn't have because I was afraid people would think I had failed." She paused and wiped away her tears. "I'm buried in debt. I owe money to the bank, to friends, and even to people I never thought I would borrow from. I kept believing that somehow everything would work out, but it only got worse." Then she looked directly at her sister. "I'm sorry for everything I said about your apartment. I laughed at you because I was jealous." Nalongo looked surprised. "I was jealous because you were happy with what you had," Zuri continued. "You were building something real while I was trying to impress people. Every time I saw you staying focused, it reminded me that I wasn't making good choices. Instead of learning from you, I mocked you. I'm truly sorry." Nalongo stayed quiet for a moment. She remembered all the hurtful words, the laughter at her housewarming, and the years of being compared to her older. She could have reminded Zuri of every painful memory, but she chose not to. She reached across the table and gently held Zuri's hand. "I forgive you," she said, "but things have to be different from now on." Zuri nodded. "I won't pay all your debts for you," Nalongo explained kindly. "If I do that, nothing will really change. You need to learn how to manage your money, just like I had to learn." Instead of simply giving her money, Nalongo helped Zuri make a fresh start. Together, they wrote down every debt, every monthly expense, and every source of income. They made a simple budget, canceled unnecessary subscriptions, and created a plan to pay off one debt at a time. Nalongo also encouraged Zuri to find extra work and start saving, even if it was only a small amount each. "It won't happen overnight," Nalongo said with a smile. "But if you stay patient and keep making good decisions, your life can change." For the first time in many years, Zuri felt something she hadn't felt in, not shame, not fear, hope. She finally understood that real success wasn't about looking rich. It was about making wise choices, living within your means, and building a future one step at a time. And this time, she was ready to begin. Several months passed, and life looked very different for both sisters. Zuri stayed committed to the financial plan she had made with Nalongo. She worked hard, avoided unnecessary spending, paid off her debts little by little, and stopped trying to impress people online. Instead of posting pictures of expensive meals and shopping bags, she focused on rebuilding her life. When she finally saved enough money to rent her own small apartment, she felt proud. It wasn't fancy, but this time it was something she could truly afford. Nalongo was just as busy as ever. Her business continued to grow, and she welcomed new clients from different parts of the world. She expanded her team, invested wisely, and kept buying income-generating property. Even with all her success, she remained humble and never forgot where her journey had started. One afternoon, Nalongo stood in the middle of the tiny apartment that had once been her whole world. Soon she would move into a larger home, but before leaving, she looked around every room with a grateful smile. She remembered the tears after the housewarming, the long nights spent working, the dreams she refused to give up, and the day her sister knocked on the same door asking for help. She gently touched the wall and whispered, "Thank you." This little apartment had given her more than a place to live. It had given her confidence, discipline, financial freedom, and a future she had once only dreamed about. As people across Kampala heard her story, many young women found hope in it. They realized they didn't need a luxury lifestyle to become successful. They didn't need to impress everyone around them. What mattered was working hard, making smart decisions, and staying patient. Nalongo's journey became proof that big dreams can begin in very small places. Sometimes the strongest foundation for a beautiful future is simply one small apartment, one brave decision, and the courage to keep going even when the whole world is laughing.